Good morning. Wanted to get into the pigeon pose today. This is not actually the pigeon, this is the reluctant pigeon, I call it. The pigeon that I see a lot of people doing in yoga class is ineffective. Usually what you'll see is a person kind of lazily step one knee forward and then not a whole lot happens. They basically end up hanging out there, and maybe if they're lucky they're getting some tissue stretching, but usually there's nothing happening. In the reluctant pigeon, we're going to really work on biasing the femur bone deep back into the hip socket, and that will help to effectively stretch those hip rotator muscles. So check it out. I'm going to start in my dog pose. Then I step one hand towards center of mat, then I step foot outside of hand. So this gets me into the lizard crawl. Notice I just move my back leg back a little bit just to make room. Then I'm going to anchor that foot down so that when I start to push the knee out like that, then I can keep that foot grounded to the floor. So I just start to work slowly back into the position. And you want to make sure that you're moving slowly and working on feeling. The mistake that people will again make here is just kind of quickly moving from side to side, and they're not really feeling for it. You want to think about becoming a connoisseur of this movement. So you're not just scarfing your food down, you're taking time to taste it. So as I start to work into that hip pocket, the head of the femur bone begins to draw back into that hip socket. So I'm using my thumb here just to clean the gutter a little bit, and use my elbow to shove the leg out, or the hand to create a little bit of space. So you experiment with the movement. I can also work a little bit in and then out, okay? And the body craves all of these varieties of movement. Now obviously I'm getting a little bit of hip extension here as well, so it's a slow, meaningful process. Working little side to side. And normally I would spend a few minutes just in this position, but for the video's sake I'm going to speed things along for you. So eventually what I would start to do is to walk the hands toward that side, and then I would begin to work toward more of a conventional pigeony type pose. Again, I call this the reluctant pigeon because I'm reluctantly heading toward the pigeon. Always breathing. And it's a combination of contracting the muscles on the inhale, so I just contracted. If you're not sure what to contract, you just tighten everything. And then in the exhale, release. So speeding things along, I'm going to drop over to that side. And I'm just trying to find that sweet spot. There it is for me, nice and sweet there. And then I'm going to gradually start to find new areas. I'm going to block that foot again, so I'm using the opposite side hand. And as I get into it, a little back and forth, you can even add just a little tilt and tuck of your hips, like you're doing cat and cow. Always working with the breath and always working slowly into it. I could even do something like this where I'm banking my elbow off that same side foot, and then I'm starting to add that rotation. If I'm really getting experimental, I can do things where I add actions in that back leg, but I want to keep right now the focus on this front leg. So I'm always working to clean my gutter here so I keep space in that anterior hip capsule. That area tends to get pretty gunky. And I'm just breathing and enjoying that process. So again, I would normally spend much more time here, but today, just to speed things along, I'll start to transition out. You always want to finish strong, so I should be able to go back into my original position. Okay? And then I'm going to step my other foot forward, and then I'm just going to do a little bit of a test here to see if, oh yeah, so that side I can feel big difference. That really starts to open out for me, so it's easier to get into a squat type position. Let's try the other side. So I'm going to extend that leg. This time, instead of entering from the dog pose, I just entered from my Asana squat. I'm going to turn that foot out a little bit. There's a range with the foot. The focal point is mainly into the hip, And you'll notice that by transitioning the foot, you'll really affect how the hip is feeling. So I'm starting to work a little bit side to side. I'm easing into it here, biasing a little bit more of that hip abduction and external rotation. Spending quality time, breathing, and loving it, really. Loving the process. So as I get into it, again, I'll speed things along here just so you see. I'm going to be walking my hands toward that side, and then I just gradually drop the hip open to that side there. So really nice and easy. And I'm not trying to work too quickly into the position. I just want to find all those sweet spots along the way. I can oscillate in and out of that pigeony type pose. And there's no need to really fidget in the position, but the movement itself adds quite a bit to it. Ida Rolf famously said to mobilize, you want to move the person into the position and then call for movement. So I'm basically DIY Rolfing my hips here. Okay? So spending that quality time in and out, breathing in and out. Great. So just a few minutes on that left side, and then I'm going to go back to center, and I'll use the squat as my test position. So back into my squat, and then I'm going to test the results here much better, so I can feel that I'm able to push the knees out more effectively. I can sense how my femurs sit back into the hip socket better, and so it ends up into a better squat position. And of course, this has implication toward really any kind of hip pose that you might be doing. For example, the lotus poses, and you can see how really it's the same type of movement. So as I work into that external hip rotation, then that gets me more freely into the lotus. And the lotus posture for yogis is highly valued because it's a really stable position that we can balance out the pelvis, the ribs, the shoulders, and the head, and it becomes a more naturally meditative posture. So that's the Reluctant Pigeon. I hope you get a chance to practice that today. I hope that you experience a really profound opening in your hips. And until next time, thank you very much.